Welcome back to Big Mouth and welcome to the dceu Daily. Remember, you can tag, follow me and speak to me over on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad WB. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Yes, earlier this week it was Ray Fisher with the Hollywood Reporter interview with quite a few bombs to throw over at Warner Brothers Pictures. And now Chris Terrio, the writer of Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, and Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut, has had an exclusive interview with Vanity Fair, which we're going to read and look at with a fine tooth comb. What's staggering about this whole franchise from its inception, these 3 films and the 5 movie arc plan, which is supposed to be Snyder's, we look at this. In Man of Steel, the movie was written by David Goyer, the story written by David Goyer and Christopher Nolan, and the other 2 movies were written by Chris Terrio. I think Zack's actually got a writer's credit for for Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut, but for Batman vs. Superman, Chris Terrio is the sole writer. Now, David Goyer's name is on there too, but David Goyer and Christopher Nolan didn't sit down and write Batman vs. Superman. That's for sure. Reading this interview, and I've already read it, but we're going to go through it again, as I say, with a fine-tooth comb. It seems to me that Terrio was like a script doctor on this film, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. We're going to read this shortly, and I think this is very, very interesting. So should we get into this now, right? And we'll talk about it afterwards, because I think there's so much to unpackage from this interview. But what this interview shows is what a shit show this whole thing is. First of all, this whole thing started because David Goyer had an idea for a Superman film, a Superman story, right? Nolan goes up to Warner Brothers and says, David Goyer, while doing the Dark Knight Rises, he had writer's block and he came up with this great idea for a Superman story. What's staggering about that is, and I said it at the time when I broke the news and when I spoke about this on social media, that Nolan was involved with a Superman movie. First of all, I was staggered that Nolan wasn't going to direct this. But why the hell not? Wasn't his Dark Knight trilogy? And why wasn't Man of Steel and the rest of the DCEU an extension of his Dark Knight trilogy? It makes perfect sense. But he didn't want to do that. And that's the problem. And I've said to you guys and girls before, and everyone else out there, that if he wasn't interested in moulding the clay, that I would never have used him for the franchise, and I wouldn't have used his friend David Goyer's script in the first place. I would have brought in my own person to shape and mould the clay of this franchise, like Kevin Feige does with the MCU. And I know we're all fed up of hearing the love for Feige, but Feige has actually, kind of constructed a proper franchise. And whether we like it or not, it works. Not all of it's perfect, but as a franchise, it works. So let's get into this now. Justice League screenwriter Chris Terrio is super pissed off. The Argo Oscar winner is tired of being hated by the haters, and he despises what happened to his DC films too, by Anthony Breznikian. Chris Terrio is not pulling his punches anymore. For 5 years, the Oscar-winning screenwriter of Argo kept his mouth shut about his work on the DC films Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice and Justice League, even as scorn from critics and fans exasperated already painful behind-the-scenes memories. Worst of all, he agreed with many of their complaints. He described the films that Warner Brothers released to theatres in 2016 and 2017 as incoherent misfires, undermined by corporate meddling, poor franchise planning, and tone-deaf decisions that prioritized costly VFX sequences over coherent storytelling. Terrio believes that Zack Snyder's director's cut of both are much stronger, if still imperfect, movies, an overall vindication of their work together. Now let's remember this as well. Zack Snyder didn't choose Chris Terrio. Ben Affleck did, as we're going to find out a little bit later on or shortly in this interview. In an exclusive wide-ranging interview, the screenwriter said the Snyder Cut of Justice League, recently released as a 4-hour-plus event on HBO Max, righted a kind of cinematic wrong perpetrated by studio leadership that has now almost entirely moved on from Warner Brothers. The 2017 theatrical cut was an act of vandalism, Terrio said. That may be too much of a gentleman to say that, but I'm not. The studio did not provide any comment on his remarks. Nah, really, you do surprise me. It's funny how they've always got a comment or something to say about Ray Fisher's comments, but not this guy, because this guy is spitting total facts with no agenda, especially not a political one. Terrio first joined the DC Universe to rewrite an existing Batman v Superman script because its Batman actor, the director of Argo, had qualms about the project. So I think we can guess, and this is not mentioned, who wrote the original script for Batman vs Superman, but I've told you guys before, it wasn't a Batman vs Superman script. It was a Man of Steel direct sequel, and that's David S. Goyer's. And this is what they're talking about here. I think the studio brought me in to appease Ben Affleck because they thought, okay, well, we have this movie star who is reluctant about doing this, so why don't we bring in his guy, Terrio said. So already they've brought in Ben Affleck's guy, but what's he got to do with Zack Snyder? Is Zack Snyder got any opinions of Terrio coming in? He clearly liked his work, or he would have had something to say. Surely. It's astounding to me, to be honest with you. The screenwriter was frank about trying to make sense of the film's warring heroes, turning their fight into a metaphor for a divided America, while attempting to fix elements he too found nonsensical or offensive. Studio officials then demanded that 30 minutes be removed from the theatrical cut, most likely because shorter runtimes mean more daily screenings, often resulting in higher box office earnings. Terrio said that act of sabotage the narrative. Now, they did this with BVS, and of course they wanted to do this with Justice League, and with Whedon's version they did it, basically wanting a 2-hour cut. So already the people in charge of Warner Brothers, not Jeff Johns, not John Berg, because I think you people have got a lot of things wrong, right? This is Sujihara. Sujihara should never have been running Warner Brothers if he really thought cutting the time length of a movie was the right thing to do. In fact, he knew nothing about films. It's astounding, again, how this man even was running Warner Brothers. If you took 30 minutes out of Argo, as they were from Batman v Superman, it would make zero sense at all. Critics would say, what a lazy screenplay, because the characters don't have motivations and it's not coherent, Terrio said. And I would agree with them. Even the title of Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice was a disaster, he said. That primed audiences to roll their eyes at the film well before its release. To be honest with you, I never cared that it was called Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. I like the idea of Dawn of Justice being in it because it's the dawn of the Justice League. This is the origin story, right? How, Ben Affleck's Batman goes and, builds this team. But Terrio never chose this title and he didn't like it. Terrio hoped Justice League would be a better experience. He was very wrong. After watching Joss Whedon's version of that film, Terrio was so disgusted that he explored taking his name off the movie. Especially galling to him was the sidelining of Ray Fisher's tragic hero, Cyborg, whose arc the actor himself had helped craft. Fisher has been outspoken for months about his experience making Justice League following years of silence. Now Terrio is doing the same. He said he bottled up his feelings about the theatrical cuts to avoid hurting their cast and crews. So why would he want to keep quiet to protect the cast and crews? Because no matter what we think of Justice League, actors and crew members, artists and everyone worked hard to put this together. They put together what they were told to put together, so they worked hard. So you must never disrespect the people on a crew and a set, no matter what you think of a movie. That's important, and this is what Chris is alluding to. Cast and crews. Now that Snyder and Terrier's preferred versions of the films are available to the public, the screenwriter is finally opening up about how it all went wrong in the first place. Chris Terrio, I am so oh my God, where have we gone? Right, here we are. It jumped, okay? Don't blame me. Chris Terrio, I am so happy and relieved that all these thousands of artists and craftspeople all over the world finally can have their work seen by the public. And all the work that Zach and the actors put into this can now be seen. It's sort of a gift that we got from HBO Max because it wouldn't have been possible a few years ago. Can you point at something specific that you are glad gets a showcase in the new version? William Dafoe's performance in the Aquaman story, obviously the character Iris West played by Kiersey Clemons in the Flash rescue sequence, and most centrally Ray Fisher's performance as Cyborg. It was always the heart of the film to me and just meant so much to me personally because so much of my heart and life were put into that story. That is the thing about this version of Justice League, that none of it was done cynically or as a money grab or an attempt to sell Happy Meal toys. It really was personal for me and for Zach and for many of the actors. But we've always got to remember that this is a business, Chris, and I understand what you're saying and I respect you as an artist for saying it. And I'm glad you put your heart and soul into it. It tells with both BVS and Justice League, and I respect that. But also, it is a business for the studio, and they do want to make money. So I get that too. Is it true you were banned from the Justice League set? I wouldn't say that I was banned. The studio attitude was, well, take it from here. I was frankly shocked when I saw the Snyder Cut and saw how much of the original script was shot. With some small revisions, they shot the script, and I understand that sometimes that was a battle for Zach. How did you feel about the version that Joss Whedon assembled after Zach left the project? When those personal touches were removed from the film in the 2017 version, I was silent because I couldn't really say anything. But of course I heard. All that remained was a dinosaur skeleton of what had been a great lumbering beast. It might have been a big unruly beast, and obviously it's 4 hours and the movie is maximalist and it's operatic, and sure, it's a little crazy, but I think the movie is crazy in the best way. Can we start at the beginning with Zach? You worked on Batman vs Superman. Can I assume that was a good experience, at least with him, since you signed on to another movie? Ben Affleck called me and said he was working on this film, which was a Superman film, in which he was going to play Batman. So listen to that. Before Chris Terrio came on, Ben called him and said it was a Superman film, the Superman sequel, the Man of Steel sequel, right? It wasn't BVS at that point to play Batman. So he asked if I would read the script and consider doing a rewrite. He asked if I would do some character work. So it was already determined and storyboarded that Batman was going to be trying to kill Superman and that Batman was going to have gone down a dark road. He was branding criminals, and it had certain dark elements that were non-negotiable and already in the story. Now this is interesting, everyone. These things already in the story before Terrio even got there, why were they non-negotiable? Were they non-negotiable because that's what Zach wanted, or that's what the studio wanted? I'm assuming they were non-negotiable because they were partly Zach's ideas. They were Zach's ideas, right? So Zach had the skeleton of what he wanted, basically. Okay. What did Affleck want you to do? My job was to create a story and a tone, really, in which Batman could be that person, in which two heroes could get to the point where they're fighting to the death. What was your approach? I came into it thinking the only way that this could work is a fever dream or as a revenge tragedy. I thought, how do we create a story in which Bruce Wayne is traumatized by the war of Krypton coming to Earth, in which he enters into this kind of madness? He becomes Captain Ahab, and he won't listen to saner voices like Alfred, for example, who are telling him to just see reason. He's a man possessed. So the film was dark by its nature. As I worked on the movie, it seemed to me that it was a snapshot of what I was feeling on the ground in the country, which maybe didn't become apparent until the madness and division that came about from the last presidency. I thought this superhero movie could be about getting into our worst natures, but then coming out of that into redemption. Now, this is interesting because Batman v Superman is very kind of similar to the Trump era, isn't it? You know, the hatred for Superman, the reaction to him, the divide because of him. And we saw what happened in real life in the Capitol building, and we saw what happened in the film. Terrio literally and Snyder predicted the future, and that's interesting. What did you want to avoid? I didn't want to make it a sitcom joke that Batman and Superman are trying to kill each other. if I'm going to work on this movie, it's going to be dark and operatic, and it's going to be uncomfortable. Zach and I come from very different approaches to filmmaking, but I immediately liked him because he isn't cynical and he wears his heart on his sleeve. I'm cynical enough for any room that I enter into. How did things develop from there? I wrote drafts of the Batman v Superman movie, which wasn't called Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice by me. I did not name the script. In fact, I found out what the movie was called along with the rest of the world on the internet. I was not consulted on the title of the film, and I was as surprised as anyone. I would not have named it Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Was that Zach's choice? Now, this is interesting. I don't know exactly who named it, but I suspect it was the studio, and I suspect it was marketing, to be honest with you. It might have been the first step toward creating an ill will for the film. I suspect that putting the words Batman and Superman into the title had some marketing component to it. Chris, are you trying to tell me that you wouldn't have put Batman and Superman in the title? I mean, come on, mate. That's ridiculous. I mean, you could have called it the world's finest, but how is that going to make sense? Because they're not friends yet, right? But I suppose you could call it the world's finest. Or you could call it the world's finest and the world's darkest. That would be an interesting one. Actually, that would have been a great title. And everyone recognises the world's finest, and we know that's a graphic novel as well, right? And that's what Batman and Superman are called as well in DC. So it would have been interesting, but I still don't see what the issue is with calling it Batman versus Superman Dawn of Justice. Now, you could have just called it Dawn of Justice. That would have been good, and people would have understood that, and that would have been cool, right? So I get it, but I'm not that triggered about the title. Kind of surprised Chris Terrio is triggered by the title, but there you have it. I think you're right that that title did rub people the wrong way. It did rub some people up the wrong way, and I remember that, but this is the internet. But the casting of Ben Affleck, rubbed up people the wrong way. Basically Nolan appointing Snyder as the director of Man of Steel rubbed some people up the wrong way. So would you say we undo that as well? This is the thing, isn't it? I heard it and I thought it just sounds self-important and clueless in a way. Tone deaf. The intention of the film was to do something interesting and dark and complex, not quite as Las Vegas bust-em-up WWE match as Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. So understand, basically, the studio wanted you to know that Batman and Superman were in the movie and they were fighting, right? That's what they wanted you to know. So really, from the very offset, the studio took away the Man of Steel standalone sequel from David Goyer, right? And probably Christopher Nolan as well. They took that away because they weren't happy with the Man of Steel box office, right? So they wanted to do this. Probably a mistake from the beginning, rushing Batman into the franchise, right? That's what they wanted, the studio. So as I've always said, this thing's a clusterfuck from the very beginning. It wasn't called Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice by me. It just sounds self-important and clueless in a way. That's just them abbreviating what he's saying, right? What he's already said. How did you feel about the version of BVS that was first released? I was proud of the script and when I completed it, but it turns out that when you remove the 30 minutes that give that character's motivation for the climax, the film just doesn't work, as we learned from the two versions of Justice League. You can't skip on the character and think the audience will give a shit about the VFX. That stuff was later restored in the extended version. I guess it's called the Ultimate Edition, remastered and released on HBO Max this March. Well, basically, there's the Ultimate Edition, which I've already got, and most of you already got, and now there's a new Ultimate Edition remastered and re-released, which I pre-ordered yesterday. Should be getting it in May. We will see. So this house of cards that has been built in order to motivate this clash between America's two favourite heroes made no sense at all. That was what happened with Batman v Superman. The movie was always going to be dark. There were always going to be people who just didn't want to see that version of a comic book world. And I get that. But what hurt was the criticism that the script was not coherent. Because when I turned in the script to the studio, which they, by all accounts, were happy with it made sense. Shall I tell you something else? Who remembers this? When Warner Brothers Pictures executives saw Batman vs Superman, they all gave the film a standing ovation. A standing fucking ovation. It's the film they wanted to see themselves. But then when the world reacted negatively, They changed their tune. They wanted a happy, inclusive DCEU that everyone could be a part of. That's not what they wanted originally, though. They actually gave BVS a standing ovation. Wow. What was your relationship with Zach? Good. I have nothing whatsoever bad to say about Zach. He has a skill set that I don't have as a visualist, and he has a contagious excitement that when you describe a scene, he almost can't contain himself, and he just wants to go draw it or paint it. Zach never for a second turned his back on me or doubted my work. After Batman v Superman, many of my Hollywood friends just stopped talking to me because they sort of thought that somehow I was complicit in this very public failure of a studio film. You learn pretty quickly who your real friends are and who your air-kissed Hollywood friends are. Yeah, been there. Zach could not have been more supportive and never stopped believing that together we were going to create this big, epic DC world. How did you feel when that journey ended prematurely with Justice League's upheaval? I went into such depression when the film was taken away and rewritten, but I didn't even feel entitled to be depressed because Zack and Debbie Snyder, his wife and co-producer, were dealing with their family tragedy. Measured against that, losing the film that you wrote seems like nothing at all, but it did hurt. It hurts to think that I cared so much about these characters and worked on nothing else for a very long time. Do you feel like the title and the cuts for length made it harder for people to appreciate things that did work in Batman vs Superman? That's exactly right. The audience has to know that they're in good hands. The minute that you lose them from a story point of view, they lose the desire to look at it generously. Once the critics decide a movie is incoherent, it's just a pile-on. Then they attack everything. There's a line at the beginning of the film where a warlord says to Lois Lane, "They didn't tell me the interview was with a lady." And Lois replies, "I'm not a lady, I'm a journalist." So one reviewer held up this line as proof positive of my stupidity and my inability to write Lois or to write at all. Well, the character of Lois in the movie was inspired by the journalist Mary Colvin, who was of course killed in Syria. She was one of the most intrepid journalists who ever lived, in my opinion, and there's a story in Vanity Fair, Mary Colvin's Private War, by Mary Brennan. And the line that Lois says is almost exactly the line that was in that article, where a Chechen warlord said he couldn't shake her hand because she was a woman. Mary Colvin replied, "There is no woman in this room, only a journalist." So that line was my tribute to her. But then in the pylon, a line like that is held as proof positive that I don't understand either women or journalists or human beings and that I'm a shitty writer. That was the climate in which the film dropped. Anything and everything was attacked because the reviewers questioned the motives behind the film. And to some extent, I don't blame them. The marketing promised a mindless fight movie. I said this, didn't I, from the beginning? The marketing was all wrong. And it actually does go with the title as well. They wanted to convince us that we were going to see a popcorn chomping Batman versus Superman fight for most of the movie, that was the heart of the movie. That's what the marketing was about. The problem with that is, and I would have been down for that type of movie, not to contradict Chris, but I'm just being honest, but that's not what this movie is. You have like 9 minutes of Batman and Superman fighting. There's so much going on other than the fight in this film, and they didn't put it in the marketing. So when people went to see it, they wasn't expecting it, and they didn't expect that because the marketing told them this was, a brawl, a free-for-all against Batman and Superman. And that's not what this film is. So people, just like The Last Jedi, went to see a movie for one reason and saw something else. And that becomes very problematic. And any attempt to make something real or complicated was just met with anger and vitriol because the audience just didn't assume good intentions. Another complaint was that Snyder's DC films were too grim and heavy. Did you feel blamed for that? The studio seemed to take this position after BVS that my writing was too dark and that this was their problem. But what they didn't mention was that, for example, in the draft of Batman v Superman script that WB had developed, which was the draft I was handed when I joined the project, Batman was not only branding criminals with a Bat brand, he also ended the movie by branding Lex Luthor. Now, that's very interesting. Now, before we go on, let me give you my take on this. In a way, now, when he talks about the WB script, I'm assuming this is David Goyer's script. That's all I can think of. Wouldn't it have been just deserves for Lex to be branded by Batman. It doesn't mean he hasn't learned his lesson, but he's going to do one more branding. This is the last time I'm ever going to do this, Luthor. You know, he kind of deserved it for what he did, right? But I can understand what Chris is saying right in this paragraph below. The ending was a point over which I explicitly went to the mat with the studio again and again. I argued that Batman cannot end the movie continuing this behaviour, which amounted to torture because then the movie was endorsing what he did. So, the branding in the first place was nothing to do with Terrio. It was to do with the original script. It was already in there. But who put this in here? Who constructed this script? David Goyer? Zack Snyder? This is what he's not saying. So there's a little bit out of context here, and I think we must be aware of that. What was your argument to them? It's one thing if Batman begins the movie as a dark version of himself who we don't recognise, but he has to see the error of his ways and remember his better self. In the course of the movie, by the end of the movie, he needs to be the Batman we know, and he has to be ready to go and create the Justice League. Otherwise, I said, what was the point? Which I agree with. What else did you push back against? I'm the one who had been saying that we can't make a joke out of Superman raining hell upon black African Muslim characters in the desert. As Lois promises that Superman is not going to go easy on them because they punched her. But somehow I'm the person with the dark sensibility. I wanted to say, I've been saving you from yourselves. I've been working with the director to bring a voice of conscience and sanity to the almost perversely dark film you've been developing for years. But I'm the problem here. So he reckons they were developing this film for a long time. Who wrote that previous script? That's what's interesting to me. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. Did you feel you were able to significantly change that Africa scene with Superman for the better? I removed the punch of Lois for one thing. I just think about the optics of that. I was able to add material to the film and ask the movie to grapple with what that battle meant, so that it didn't seem like a casual scene of Superman intervening in this way without reckoning with the consequences of intervention. I placed that in context of a moral question. Superman says, think of what could have happened, and Lois says, think of what did. The sequence takes place in a fictional African country called Nairobi, and there's manipulation happening with Lex Luthor and his American mercenaries trying to provoke conflict and frame Superman. After Superman rescues Lois, the film shows the people of that region truly suffering in the crossfire. Without sounding too political, it's not lost on me that much like a drone, Superman sort of comes from out of nowhere from the sky and vanquishes his enemies, then flies off with no consequences. That may not have been an angle on Superman that people wanted to see and wanted to think about. Did you also add the scene with the character Kahina Siri, who was a witness to the battle, testifying about the aftermath in Washington, D.C.? Ultimately, we learned she was coerced by Luthor, but her testimony does make the audience and Clark Kent himself reevaluate his actions and how he operates. Yeah, that was added afterwards. I added that scene. He came down, then came fire. The story that she tells, at least in the script, is that he destabilized the entire region and then government forces came in and slaughtered the village. Since these were the optics that already were in the movie, I thought that my job was to ask questions and say, what do we actually mean by this? Again, who put these optics originally before Chris came in? This is the mystery here. Who actually originally constructed this movie? I still think it's David Goyer. But it's a bit odd, isn't it? This is what I'm talking about. You're pushing back against some of these scenes and you're saying that the studio wanted these things, but you also had to convince Zack, right? So was Zack Snyder open to these kind of criticisms? When I would talk to Zack about some of these things, I think he got it. We discovered that we were on the same page and that he loved the idea of a scene in Congress with this African woman describing the consequences in her village. He right away sparked to that and got excited about casting that character with actor Wunmi Masako, now known for Lovecraft Country. What a job she did in BVS, by the way, and Lovecraft Country. I think she's amazing. Great casting by Snyder there, and thought she would be a very important character for the movie. So Zack was quite open to all this stuff, and I thought the studio was too. Why weren't they? Later, when I realised that so much of the plot was going to be cut out, I began to think, well, they didn't really want this kind of story. The last things to get cut out always are the stunt scenes and the special effects scenes because they cost so much. By the time they're all in, they're in the assembly, enormous amounts of money have been spent on every frame. So when you're looking to cut time, the things that get cut out tend not to be the big effect sequences or the fights or the stunt sequences. The things that get cut are the nuance question mark. Yeah. Now, look, before I continue, we do go partly for these big films because of the spectacle, right? No one's going to see Godzilla and Kong because of the nuance, right? This is what I'm talking about. So I understand what Chris is saying. They should never have cut the nuance out, right? But you also can't expect them to cut out the VFX and the stunning, compelling moments of the movie either. There's got to be, you've got to meet each other halfway on these things, or you have problems. And I think this was the problem from the very beginning. Yeah, the scenes that actually give meaning to those bigger action sequences. I think that's a problem, not only with this film, but I suppose for all tentpole films. Given your concerns about the BVS structure you inherited, why did you sign on to Justice League? I agreed to write Justice League because I wanted the chance to write these characters with love, hope, and after getting through the darkness of Batman v Superman, the end of my version of Batman v Superman includes Bruce seeing the error of his ways and promising to change. It's the return of conscience, and after an ethical nightmare, and in Justice League, Bruce does do better. After Batman v Superman came out, the critical reaction was negative. The box office was underwhelming. Justice League was about to begin shooting. What was the atmosphere like then? There was a mood of fear at the studio, no doubt. My impression was that people in boardrooms started making decisions, and they were decisions based on arbitrary metrics that had nothing to do with the stories that were being told. But again, I do have to put myself in the studio's position as well, Chris. This film wasn't what people wanted, or what a lot of people wanted. This film, the reaction to this film was polarizing and toxic. If I was them, I'd be nervous too. And I suppose automatically you may think, we need to lighten things up, man. But they just went about it the wrong way because they have no idea about telling a story. This is the problem. What gave you that sense? Right before the time of Batman v Superman, I was asked to attend an event in New York where the cast and filmmakers were paraded in front of a room of investors at the time Warner Center, I guess to convince them that their money was in good hands. What happened then? These guys were in charge because they controlled the money at the very top of the pyramid. They were making big decisions, not the film executives we're talking about, but Wall Street guys. One guy who I can only describe as the man whose central casting sends you when you're trying to cast douchebag one. Oh my God, that just nails it, doesn't it? Pulled me aside and started telling me how to write Batman, douchebag one. I love it. I'm not naive. I know that if you don't want to have any back and forth with the money people, then you should write poetry because you don't need hundreds of millions of dollars. But something about the distribution of power at that time just seemed off to me. It was removing even the pretense that capital wasn't calling the shots. Well, it's Hollywood, my friend. That's what does call the shots. What impact did these studio tensions have on your writing? I rewrote Justice League to lighten the mood a little bit, which became the Zack Snyder's Justice League. That slightly lighter, less dense version of the script, which I was fine with. I'm saying I will play ball with those kinds of notes. So, the film we saw was lightened up a bit. This isn't the scary idea, but it's nearly Zack's definitive vision and Chris's definitive vision, which is a good thing. So Zack Snyder shot your version of the script. What happened after his family crisis led to him to leave the project, and Warner Brothers brought in Joss Whedon to rewrite and reshoot. When the movie was taken away, that felt like it was some directive that had come from people who are neither filmmakers nor film friendly. The directive to make the movie under 2 hours, regardless of what the movie needed to do, and to make the colours brighter, and to have funny sitcom jokes in it. Zack told me it was then Warner Brothers chairman Kevin Sugihara mandate that it would be under 2 hours and more comedic. Yeah, that's what I heard also. I never had anything direct with him. Sugihara, as far as I can tell, and the brass at the very top decided the order of the films. I was not consulted on the order of the films, even though I was the person writing Justice League. They just determined that it was going to be Batman v Superman and then Wonder Woman, then Justice League and then Aquaman. So there was never any thought to how the world was constructed before they issued this edit. They said, conform to this schedule. Now, this does complicate things, and I'll read to you what Chris says and why that is, but there wasn't a grand plan. The guy's writing Justice League, and there isn't a grand plan for the franchise, and he doesn't even know about Wonder Woman and Aquaman and what's going to go on there. So again, there's no world building here whatsoever, because the people working on this, Zach and Chris, haven't got the tools to build a world. They can only build their own world. That is problematic, and this is why having Kevin Feige at the very top at Marvel Studios works so well. Explain how that complicated things. The Wonder Woman script wasn't even finished when I wrote Justice League, so I had no basis to write Wonder Woman other than Batman v Superman. Themyscira didn't even exist. I was never shown anything on the page for it. I didn't know whether people could talk underwater. That was a thing that I had to ask, because I didn't know if I could do underwater scenes with Aquaman and Atlanteans. It was all just from scratch, because there had been no solo character films. So do you understand, everyone, why it was problematic from the very beginning that they didn't have the solo films first, then the Justice League trilogy? It makes no sense. What are you basing your Justice League movie off of? Like he says, how do you know what it looks like? How do you know what Themyscira looks like? Atlantis? You know, this is the problem. And this is what was so problematic. Everything was pressured. Everything was rushed. There was no plan. This was the problem from the very beginning. So Justice League needed to establish three of the characters. It had to create a long game mythology for the DC universe. It had to resurrect Superman because he was dead at the end of the last movie. I just don't know how you could do all of that in under 2 hours. Maybe the 2017 release proved that you couldn't. Studio correspondents John Berg and Jeff Johns were on the Justice League set every day, which was a mandate from Sugihara to babysit Snyder, as he put it. What was your relationship with them? Look, I admire Jeff Johns as a writer of DC Comics. He's been nice to me, and it's a perfectly cordial relationship. As an executive, you get into very thorny territory when you have a person who's a writer who also is making executive decisions and sitting in a chair, where on other films the writer would have been. So that's interesting. So is he saying that Johns was sitting in the position and the chair that he should have been? Maybe so. So I think it's miraculous that Zack shot as much of my script as he did, because I know there was constant pressure to simplify, to change, to do whatever it is that the studio wanted, because there were rumblings that they didn't want this version. Did you have many interactions with the actors? I wasn't invited on the set, but obviously I know Ben and I got to know Ray Fisher. We developed Cyborg together. Ray came to my apartment in the East Village, and he and I just would take long walks and talk about Cyborg and the responsibility of putting the first black DC superhero in a movie on screen. That was a big responsibility we both understood and took very seriously. Remember, this was before Black Panther. There's obviously have been some black superheroes over the years, but none depicted with such a budget and such scale and in such mainstream way. Cyborg is the one character who can't disguise himself. He lives in his skin. His otherness is a constant fact of his life. And that, to me, and Ray and I discussed this, speaks about being a black man in America. You cannot remove the otherness that people force upon you. And therefore, Cyborg, when he becomes the hero that he always should have been and was meant to be, that felt like something really strong that we wanted the world to see. What about any of the other performers? Did you consult with any of them? I talked to Jeremy Irons on the phone. I had correspondence with Gal Gadot where she would write to me and say, this doesn't seem quite right for the character. What do you think? And it was all a really good relationship where all the roles would be bespoke to the actors. When the Snyders left the project, that was effectively the end of your involvement. Is that right? That's right. I would only hear occasionally reports about the reshoot. I didn't realise how much of the film was going to be changed or vandalised. Wow, yeah, that's a ruthless way of putting it, but it's true. In my opinion, it became clear as I spoke to various actors that it was a wholesale dismantling of what had been there before. I did not hear from anyone who said it was a pleasant experience. Were you hearing anything about Joss Whedon and his management of the set? I probably shouldn't get into that. I've never met Joss. I don't know him. I did reach out to him at the beginning of the process through the executives, but I didn't hear back, which is not unusual. When did you watch his version of Justice League? I was in LA at the time working on Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. Do you know what? One of the things that's not discussed in this interview is his role on The Rise of Skywalker and writing that screenplay. I want to know, is that his film? What happened there? And he's not really talking about that. Hopefully, in the next week, few days or something, we hear something about that, because I am very interested about that. I was on the west side of Los Angeles working with J.J. Abrams at the time, and I drove to the studio and I sat down and watched it a couple of weeks before release. I immediately called my lawyer and said, I want to take my name off the film. The lawyer then called Warner Brothers and told them that I wanted to do that. Why didn't you? Prints had been already struck or hard drives burnt, or however they deliver movies these days. The elements were on their way, and to remove my name, there would have to had to restrike the prints or redo the digital copies, and the film could be delayed. It would be an international scandal and news story. So I shut up and said nothing publicly. I've never said anything about Justice League since then, but the movie doesn't represent my work. What happened after that? As far as I know, I wasn't invited to the premiere and I never watched the film again. So why not follow through and remove your name? I think it would have created a whole wave of negativity publicly that I think would have made the situation even worse for the actors and for all the craftspeople who had worked on it, for all kinds of people. But I am awfully happy that Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League is one that is higher on my IMDb page. Something that was this big and prominent and then so widely derided. It kind of poisons your reputation, doesn't it? Yeah, it hurts your reputation, but more importantly, it poisons your soul and your confidence, especially when this other version of the film wasn't seen. And now that it has been seen, people do have problems with this version of the film, and they'll quibble with the length and they'll quibble with the way certain characters are written. But that I can take, because that is an actual critique of my work. That's fair game, and that I'll engage with any day. People can quarrel with the movie, but at least they're quarrelling with my version and with Zack's version of the film. Did you ever feel like they deliberately made you the scapegoat, the studio? I am a deeply paranoid person, so I'm always assuming that everyone has it in for me. Justice League, the Zack Snyder version, is the only script other than Argo that I have a sole writer credit on. I really did develop this, so I can stand by the version, love it or hate it. What are you working on right now? What's on the horizon? I won't talk about it quite yet, but it's a small film that I'm doing with Amazon. I'm getting back to smaller character-driven worlds, where I don't have any of the franchise issues that have been difficult to grapple with. The past, that's really helped me to reground myself and remind myself of why I like to write a film. So that's it. That's the interview. So pretty interesting, pretty damning, but it really just goes back to what I was saying at the top of the show, that from its inception, the DCEU was a clusterfuck, right? And is there much point going back to the past? I think there is. I think this week we've had Ray Fisher speaking out again and Chris Terrio for the first time. But when we look at this, it's all messy, isn't it? It really is. As I said at the beginning of the video, I said that Nolan and Goya constructed this story for Man of Steel. Terrio constructed the story. Most of it, although Zack had the skeletons of a concept. That's obvious. That's why he said that some of the things were non-debatable. Zack had wanted certain things. But also, what about this original script that Warner Brothers did? Well, Warner Brothers don't write scripts. Did the executives sit in a room and come up with this? Is this there was a Batman v Superman plan many years ago. Is it the script from that film? Who knows? I mean, that's pretty bad. But I think the original script actually is the Man of Steel sequel script from David Goyer. So you've got so many different people and different minds and different ideas, and it doesn't work. Now do you understand why having one showrunner at the MCU with Kevin Feige works so well? His ideas, what he says goes, right? It all stands and falls with him, and mostly it stands. Whether you like him or not, like what the franchise stands for or not, it works and it excites people and it makes nearly $1 billion a picture. That's the thing here. There never was a constructive plan. They weren't even planning a franchise when Man of Steel was done. This is how ridiculous it was. We talk about Zack's arc. There was no arc being planned when they were doing Man of Steel. Zack didn't write the narrative or construct the narrative for Man of Steel. He may have put a few of his ideas in there. I agree with that. So then we get to BVS and Zack's got a skeleton of a plan. Terrio comes in. We know how the world reacted. And then after that, everyone goes mad, mostly the studio, the money men, as Chris explains it. Well, of course, they have a right to be worried. I think from the very beginning, I think that the studio and everyone thought they could do whatever the fuck they wanted and get away with it and not have an idea. Basically, this is Hollywood as well. They never kind of think about the audience. They never thought for one moment that people wouldn't want Superman to break someone's neck. They never thought for one moment that the public and the DC hardcore fans didn't want to see Batman v Superman the way it was. As you already know, I love these two films, and I don't have a big issue with the snapping of the neck. Not that I wish there were more consequences to it in the future, but I still don't think it's a big deal. But clearly, many, many other people do. So this is a YouTube video. We're thinking of everyone besides ourselves, right, as well. So I don't know who thought this was a good idea, right? Terrio talks about the script being dark already. Luthor being branded by Batman at the end of the movie. Nuts, right? Absolute nuts. So the branding was already in there. I'm assuming by Zack. I don't know. Because this is the problem with this interview. He kind of skips over a few things. He doesn't want to say bad things about Whedon, although he says bad things about his movie, but he doesn't want to say bad things about Jeff Johns, so he kind of skips that and alludes to things. And that's really the problem with this interview, really. He skips over things. Was he happy with what Zack did? He said that him and Zack have got two different mentalities of making films, right? That's interesting because both of them work together, right? This was not a man chosen by Zack. It's already convoluted. And so when you look at all of this, no one has an actual fucking plan here. Right, I know Zack had a 5-movie arc. I understand that. And the way Zack explains it, it sounds amazing. It sounds like a great arc for the Man of Steel. And I understand that. And I think there's a place for it. There's definitely a place for it. And we'll see what happens if HBO Max can greenlight and restore the Snyderverse. Everything's up in the air. But who's doing this? Who's behind all of this? These interviews from Fisher, from Chris Terrio. Who's behind this? Well, there's two entities here, and Warner Media and AT&T are one entity. Obviously, AT&T own everything. And then I think there's Warner Brothers Pictures. Warner Brothers Pictures did something very, very interesting just before it was released. Now, that hit piece from Ann Sarnoff that interview was not done. I know it was released on the 19th or 20th, right, of March, but that was actually conducted, that interview, a few days before the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League. So they didn't care how it was going to do. They didn't think about how it was going to do. Maybe they were so arrogant they didn't think it would do big business. So they did that hit piece where they said, right, I'm looking forward to the Central Universe. Right, Sarnoff never says that there's going to be no more Zack Snyder's Snyderverse, but she does say that she's focused on the Central Universe and they're happy that Zack's completed his trilogy. That means the end, no more, right? No haircut or anything like that. Of course, she's not the boss anyway, and we know that. So this piece was done, and I was listening, I was watching the video from Midnight's Edge, who really did explain the situation perfectly, right? That hit piece was done to stop us in our tracks, to depress us, to not want us to watch anymore because there's not going to be any more, to keep the numbers down. What was the response to that? 1.5 million tweets of Restore the Snyderverse. It backfired on them. The Ray Fisher interview on Hollywood Reporter, from the Hollywood Reporter, was a direct consequence of the hit piece. Yesterday's interview from Vanity Fair with Chris Terrio, a direct consequence of that hit piece. They don't seem to understand what's going on. And it seems to me that that hit piece is the last throw of the dice, and was the last throw of the dice from Ann Sarnoff from Warner Brothers Pictures. A desperate attempt to destabilise the fans and Zack's attempts to restore the Snyderverse. And you have to wonder how effective these articles are, because they're pretty damning. What we've also got to understand, Kevin Sujihara isn't running Warner Brothers Pictures anymore, right? These money men, at the very top, I don't know if they're still there at Warner Brothers Pictures. It's interesting. Now, Warner Media are changing things at the whole company. Things are changing. We know that Jason Keeler and somebody else runs Warner Media, and we know John Stankey runs AT&T. And so slowly but surely they will get to Warner Brothers Pictures. I think that, as I say, Warner Brothers Pictures and AT&T are behind these tell-all interviews. I think there is a divide. I think Midnight's Edge is right. There is a civil war, and I think everyone's saying that. It's not rocket science. It's not something I just pulled out the air. It's a fact. It's happening, and in a civil war, these things happen. And it is interesting how Warner Brothers Pictures do keep on acting emotionally. Every time something happens, what will they do after these two kind of tell-all pieces with so many revelations in them, right? We know that Terrio didn't like the title. We know that Terrio didn't even know what was in the Wonder Woman 2017 script. So how could he continue something from a film when he didn't know what that film looked like? It was nuts. So this goes beyond this, doesn't it? Why would you schedule a Justice League film before the guy can even look at Wonder Woman and know what Themyscira looks like? Why would you schedule it, right? Who scheduled that? The studio. It wasn't Zack. Zack was told after BVS, after Man of Steel, it had to be BVS, it had to be Batman and Superman, because they were scared after the box office of Man of Steel, because their projections were $1 billion per picture, right? That's what they wanted and expected. So that's the past now. So the whole thing was a clusterfuck, right? As I've said before and earlier on in this video, when they approached Christopher Nolan, and they knew he wasn't interested in directing Man of Steel, and he was just going to, co-write the story with David Goyer, they were red flags where you say, no, we're going to find our own person to construct this universe, and thank you very much, and, good luck with the Dark Knight Rises, but, we can't be with you, Chris, because we need someone to construct this whole thing. And obviously he brought them Zack Snyder. That should have been another red flag. Again, I have to say it because this is the world we live in. It is 2021. I love Zack Snyder. I love the Snyderverse of DC. But it's clearly, if you're looking as a business to make a commercial franchise, Zack Snyder surely isn't the man you go to run a whole franchise or to direct a Superman movie. Surely you must understand that as intelligent business people, or maybe you're not intelligent business people. So this is where it all went wrong. Right, so what happens now? Do these articles keep on coming out? And do these articles do real damage? That is something I can't tell you. These are things that only the people at Warner Brothers Pictures and Warner Media know. What do they think of these tell-all articles? Does this make them think about the Snyderverse being restored? Well, the only thing that's going to get the Snyderverse restored is the trends, but most of all, it's the business that Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut has been doing on HBO Max. Now, the other day, yesterday here on the DCEU Daily, we read out some, provisional kind of numbers for Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut. Now, some of it was silly things like how many people watched the opening 5 minutes? Did they complete the movie? 4-hour movie, people are taking their time to watch the movie. So that shouldn't be an issue or spoken about negatively. And I've already seen a bunch of YouTubers with agendas saying half of the audience didn't finish the movie. Yes, they have finished the movie. They just took their time to finish the movie. There's a difference. 68% more people downloaded the HBO Max app, right? And another high percentage kept on opening it up, right? Zack Snyder's Justice League is an unparalleled success. You can twist the figures that we've had so far as much as you like. It's a success, right? Batman versus Superman, right? The reconstructed version, right? That's just come out on 4K, right? Is sold out. Big business. Sold out within an hour or whatever it was. 10 minutes? I can't remember. This is a feasible universe, right? And it's a feasible universe that I believe will continue because it's been a success. So they will greenlight more, I think, at HBO Max. But there's another question for you here. Why did Ann Sarnoff do the hit piece? Why are they so desperate? If it is just a case of it being greenlit on HBO Max, why does Sarnoff care? She's got her central universe. Is she worried it'll be better? Is she worried it interfere with what they're doing? Or is there a chance that Snyder could get the keys back, as I predicted after I saw Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut. It's interesting, isn't it? Is that what they're really afraid of? It could be. But my final thoughts on this interview, as I say, we always kind of heard from Chris saying he would open up when the time was right after he finished with The Rise of Skywalker. That's been some months, and he took his time, gathered his thoughts, as he does when he's writing one of his scripts, and he said a lot of interesting things. He mostly said a lot of things that made sense. I understand his frustration, and I mean, we're all frustrated about this situation. The whole thing is a mess, and it's a mess someone's going to have to fix. But like two children that keep on arguing, like two romantic partners every day after work. You said this, I did that, you like that woman's picture. It never changes. Something's going to have to change, right? Because there's a central universe in development. There's 4 movies coming out next year. And that's happening, whatever we want and whatever we say. So what happens to the Snyderverse? Well, at this moment in time, nothing's happening with the Snyderverse. And of course, here on Big Mouth, if anything breaks, I will let you know immediately. But wow, what a week for Warner Brothers. A disastrous week where 2 massive articles have really destroyed them. And I mean, only time will tell what the damage is. Because if these interviews are damaging, then the Snyderverse will be restored immediately. Because if you restore the Snyderverse, you stop the interviews. It's as simple as that. This is what this is all about. This is a war. Zack Snyder, Jason Kilar, and AT&T and John Stankey versus Ann Sarnoff and the Toby Emmerich and the Warner Brothers Pictures mob. This is what the war is. Who's going to win? We're going to have to wait and see. But right now, I think it's checkmate. And we've got some requests from our resident DC obsessive, Scott Edwards, at Movies TV Mad. A brief but very interesting article for the next DCEU Daily. So let's take a look at that. Could DC's Owlman movie tie into Black Adam? The tapestry of the DC film universe seems to be changing on a daily basis nowadays, between some major casting announcements for Warner Bros. Upcoming blockbusters, as well as the release of a long-awaited installments like Zack Snyder's Justice League, along with the way new projects are continuing to be greenlit by the studio, including an Owlman film, which was confirmed to be in the works last week. Yeah, I never did talk about this, did I? Because at the time it was the build-up to Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I was just focused on that. Was confirmed to be in the works last week. The project, which will follow some version of the DC Comics legacy character of the same name, will be co-produced by Warner Bros. DC, sharing entertainment with San Andreas and Hot Wheels scribes Gavin Games and Neil Widener writing the script. While details surrounding the Owlman film are relatively scarce, including what pocket of the DC multiverse it will fall into, as well as which incarnation of Owlman the film will centre on, the groundwork could already be in place to connect the film to another upcoming DC Comics blockbuster, Black Adam. The versions of Owlman exist across DC Comics, beginning with Rex Tyler and held the mantle in the golden age of comics. The general concept that Owlman can use a Miraculo, a chemical compound created by Rex to gain superpowers for precisely 1 hour, has since extended to the multiple other versions of the character. Rex's son, Rick Tyler, as well as an android named Matthew Tyler outside of that legacy aspect, one of the biggest things that Owlman has been associated with over the years has been his membership of the Justice Society of America. That's a good point, because they're going to be in Black Adam, aren't they? That the very first superhero team that began in the Golden Age. As those who have been following even most tangible elements of Black Adam know, the film is expected to showcase the live-action film debut of the Justice Society, with principal casting for Black Adam's main JSA members now locked down. Hawkman, Aldous Hodge, Cyclone, Quintessa Swindell, Atom Smasher, Noah Centeno, and Dr. Fate Pierce Brosnan. It's already become clear that the team will be multi-generational as opposed to being within the same age range. This plays well within the comic legacy of the JSA itself, as the team has historically operated in multiple different eras, often with legacy versions of its previous members, and it could play directly into Owlman if the solo film wanted it to. Let's talk about this for a minute before we read on. Could it be that Owlman is actually, we don't know this yet, could kind of cameo in Black Adam and then spin off to his own movie. That would be a really awesome idea. And they are talking about now spinning all these characters, them sharing the screen, which I think is a great idea, by the way. It's not all bad and it's not all negative. Let's remember that. Assuming that the JSA existed in some capacity before the events of Black Adam, there are still a lot of members of that Golden Age ensemble that are unknown, outside of maybe a younger Dr. Fate and a previous reincarnation of Hawkman. Given Owlman's long history with the team in the comics, it's easy to picture him as part of that older live-action roster, something that could easily be explored through the Owlman film, if it decided to follow Rex Tyler's earlier exploits as a superhero. If the film mainly followed a younger Rick Tyler in the present day, there could still be potential to showcase that era of the JSA. The original incarnation of the team being part of the legend of Owlman that Rick has to live up to, and a new incarnation of the JSA that he could join. Granted, if Owlman ends up being an entirely standalone DC film akin to 2019's Joker, I don't think that's the case. Then that's awesome and worth celebrating in its own right. But the legacy of the JSA and the fact that Black Adam producer and star Dwayne Johnson starred in the aforementioned San Andreas definitely create an avenue for Owlman to connect with his fellow team members. I think they're going to do that and potentially create a much richer cinematic universe in the process. Yes, a pretty strong article there. I know nothing apart from what I've just read here about Owlman. He actually sounds like a really exciting character, so thanks, Scott, for putting that my way. And here's another one, at Movies TV Mad, the Illuminati.com 2020, and this one talks more about Eclipso and Sabbath, who might be villains in Black Adam. So it seems like Scott's very excited like me about Black Adam right now. The villains of Black Adam, Sabbath and Eclipso. Sabbath and Eclipso may not be the... God, why do I have to manage my settings? Right, let's start again. Sabbath and Eclipso may not be the first names you think of when someone brings up DC villains. In the likelihood, the names of these two demonic antagonists are brand new to you. The good news, Black Adam fans, is that we're here to break down everything you need to know about Bruce Gordon and Ismael Gregor. Well, we'll start with Bruce Gordon, or Eclipso, as an Illuminati breakdown of Sabbath is right here for you, your reading pleasure. Bruce Gordon, an in-house joke, and the amalgamation of Bruce Wayne and Jim Gordon, courtesy of the character creator Bob Haney, was a scientist who specialized in solar power. A little on the nose, I know, and wounded up on Diablo Island. It was here that he would be possessed by the villainous Eclipso, the fallen wrath of God. Now, it's difficult to explain Eclipso's power properly without comparing him to the spirit of vengeance, Zarathos. In the Marvel Universe, or to his DCEU successor, the Spectre, Eclipso is an extremely old force, one that predates humanity itself. He is the embodiment of God's fury, and to give you an idea of how insanely powerful the being is, he is solely responsible for the Great Flood in the Bible. Wow! Both the Spectre and Eclipso have accomplished feats of incredible strength and fought against Omega level or stronger entities multiple times. Since he was corrupted, Eclipso became more closely aligned with the revenge and holy justice and became trapped in the heart of darkness, a black diamond which contained Eclipso. Lest an individual touch the diamond, it was eventually split into 1,000 pieces and actually liquefied by Wildcat's brother, cousin in the source material, Alex Montez. Once, but regardless of what form it took, the heart of darkness most always held some sway over Eclipso, something that infuriated the power vengeance demon. Fans of Stargirl may recall Cindy Burnham, alias Shiv, discover a mysterious glowing diamond, a formerly property of the Injustice Society of America. This diamond is the Arrowverse's first tease of Eclipso, who has since been confirmed to play a major antagonist role in Season 2 of Stargirl. In the DCEU, it would appear as though the aforementioned Heart of Darkness appeared in the animated Black Adam trailer, though this has not been outright confirmed. The Direct exclusively reported that Eclipso would be a villain in Black Adam, though exact details regarding his role were unavailable. As Eclipso, its own being separate to Bruce Gordon, it's entirely possible that the character will possess a citizen of Carhag, assist with the banishment of Black Adam, only to be imprisoned himself. Another possibility is Eclipso was banished before Black Adam, and his Heart of Darkness merely resides in proximity to Black Adam out in space, or wherever they are exactly. The point is that even if Eclipso appears in this film, he may play a small role, and there is no guarantee that Bruce Gordon would also appear in the film. In the comics, Ismail Gregor is a Russian mob boss who performs a dark ritual involving the murder of both Timothy Kearns, formerly known as Sabbac, and a bus full of innocent people. This ritual bestows him the power of Sabbac, which is no small thing. By saying Sabbac, Ismail becomes a demon with powers akin to Shazam and Black Adam's, plus the ability to breathe fire. His name is an acronym of 6 Lords of Hell, and he was seen fighting the Outsiders and Shazam Jr., Captain Marvel Jr. in his few appearances in the source material. So Black Adam is currently searching for a 40-year-old male to play a villain named Ismabel. Aladdin's Marwan Kenzari is a person of interest for the role. Ismail is a villain with an army descended from murdered Pharaoh. His goal is to harness the power of the crown of Sabbac. My assumption is that Ismail has been retooled, abandoning the Russian mob boss cliche for something more directly tied to the world of Black Adam. Logically, we can also infer that the powers of Sabbac will lay within this crown and not Timothy Kearns in the version of Ismail's story. The roles these two could play. Before getting into speculation, I need to make 2 things very clear. First of all, with the film still a few months away from beginning production, this is an old article, by the way, they're beginning production today, and no release date currently in sight. We know this is an old article now. Rewrites are always a possibility. Secondly, I have a lot of respect for the director, and I'm not saying that Eclipso is not in Black Adam. I'm simply saying that according to the same information which revealed that Sarah Shahi was offered a role in Black Adam before she officially accepted, indicates that Ismail will be the primary antagonist of the film. On top of that, the role that Sabbac will play is Osiris' origin story practically guarantee his spot as the main supervillain of Black Adam. But is Black Adam going to have a main villain, or is it going to be something that's more of a piece with a group of actors and characters, and Black Adam is the lead here, and they need him for some kind of fight, maybe with a main villain or a group of villains maybe? We're going to have to wait and see. So I don't think anyone with the hand on their heart can start saying, I know this is the main villain. You can't. Related, first look at Titan Bubble. Yeah, we don't care. Let's say that again. Theoretically, Black Adam could open in ancient Carhag, following the Tef Adam and possibly Prince Khufu in their liberation of the country. Tef Adam's unbridled rage would lead the wizard Shazam to banish him. Eclipso, if he is in the film, would likely factor into the prologue of sorts as the primary storyline. We'll focus on Black Adam, the Justice Society ISIS, and the fight against Ismail Sabbac. Eclipso might have possessed the aforementioned murdered Pharaoh, or he might have helped Black Adam, Prince Khufu, overthrow the regime in Carhag. If he appears in the scene set in the present day, perhaps he could be mentioned or shown by an enemy of the JSA. There are a number of ways which they could factor into the plot of the movie in a small role. Personally, I would like to see how Black Marvel family would fare against Sabbac and Eclipso simultaneously, though. That isn't likely to happen. Would you prefer to see Eclipso or Sabbac as the main villain? It doesn't really matter to me because I don't know them. So, Scott, that's that article. And finally, Scott says, at Movies TV Mad, and my question for the next DCEU Daily after you read the articles is, how do you think the story of Black Adam will go? Do you think him and the JSA will start off as enemies, but ultimately have to team up to fight a bigger threat at the end of the film? I think the JSA are looking for someone to help them against something so powerful that only Black Adam can help. They know that Black Adam's dangerous, but I think they're on a mission to help him escape. So he's obviously been imprisoned, right? So they help him escape to help them with this threat. So they may even be able to time travel like the Legion are. Maybe they have Legion rings. Maybe they're working with the Legion now. Who knows? Because we know the JSA are an older kind of version of Justice League that predate the Justice League, of course. So that's what I'm looking at there, Scott, that they've decided to break the rules, time travel, find Black Adam to stop some threat. Maybe he has to travel in the future with them or in the past. Who knows? But just like you, Scott, I'm really, really excited about the Black Adam movie and all the 4 movies releasing next year. Wow, what a quandary the DC Extended Universe is. People who worked on it in the past, very frustrated, very angry, fighting to restore the Snyderverse. You've got Warner Bros. Pictures and Walter Hamada and Jim Lee and Ann Sarnoff fighting for this new era of DC Extended content. And to be honest with you, I'm puzzled and excited at the same time. So we will see what the future holds for the DCEU. For now, check you later. I'll see you again for even more DCEU Daily tomorrow. For now, bye-bye. Wow, that was one long-ass video, wasn't it? See you now.